All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Road to Run. I see that people are starting to join in with us right now. So excited to have you. We're going to give it just a few minutes as people are logging in. But I think it's always great to get to know who's with us today. So if you want to go ahead and check that chat box, and make sure the line says to all panelists and attendees, and let us know where you're joining us from today. For my part, I am in Central Florida. I'm really excited to be focusing on Florida women today. But again, if you'll just check the box in your chat, make sure it says to all panelists and all panelists and attendees. We'd love to hear where you're joining us from today. People from Ohio, good to have you. Indianapolis, Texas, Chicago, Phoenix, Washington, D.C. I love seeing women from all over the country. New Jersey, I love New Jersey. I lived there for a short time. Welcome from North Carolina. Welcome from New York. All right. We're going to give it just another moment as people are still joining us. Oh, we have someone here from Canada. Welcome. North Central Montana. I was able, by fortunate circumstance, to do a road trip to Montana this year. A beautiful state. Oh my goodness, such gorgeous hikes, such gorgeous waterfalls. I was in heaven. People here from Tampa. Hello, Floridians. I'm so happy to have you here. Again, we're just going to give it another moment as people are joining. Go ahead, if you just joined us, you want to make sure you have that chat open, that the line says to all panelists and attendees, and we'd love to hear where you're joining us from. All right, well, welcome to She Should Run's Road to Run event. My name is Jarinete Santos. I am the Political Pipeline Director here at She Should Run and delighted to be hosting us today. Just as a couple reminders and housekeeping items for this session. So this session is being recorded. You'll have access to it later on if you would like. We also have closed captioning available. So if you want that available throughout this session, go ahead and hit the CC box on your bottom panel. And then you'll be able to see that coming through. We also have this stream text available. There's a link in the chat. If that is an easier option for you, go ahead and feel free to take advantage of that option. Throughout the entirety of the webinar, you are welcome to use the chat function. People are in there from She Should Run to be able to help answer questions. But when we move over to the Q&A section, if you look at that bottom panel, you'll want to see the Q&A box. Any questions that you have for our panelists, we ask that you include there. And then finally, at the end of each of our sessions, we have a short 3-minute evaluation survey. We would appreciate if you plan now to take a moment to fill that survey out at the end. It helps us know how to better serve all of the women who are interested in these programs, and it helps us know about topics to include as we continue on for the future. So for 2020, this is our 5th of 6 Road to Run events. So we're near the end, but so excited to be able to talk about topics that are so important, from purpose to balance to equality, things that impact women, especially as they're considering a run for office and what that means for them. At She Should Run, we're a nonpartisan nonprofit that focuses on dramatically increasing the number of women considering a run for office. As a population that makes up 52% of Americans, women are still dramatically underrepresented in our elected leadership, coming in at just below 30% in most cases. And we know that we aren't going to have more women running for office unless they're first considering running for office. So we provide a variety of education, resource, and events like this to help give a peek behind the curtain about what running for office means, what serving in office can look like, and how to help you make a plan for yourself if you would like that to be an option. So today specifically, we're talking about the topic of risk. And this is really valuable if you're running for office or even if you're just looking to improve your personal leadership. When it comes to risk, there are a variety of preconceptions that we have. For some people, this can be an exhilarating opportunity to try something new and to make mistakes and learn. For others of us, it can be considered reckless or really uncomfortable or something that we want to avoid at all costs. What we do know is that across the board in most standards, women are less likely than their male counterparts to take leadership risks. And because they don't engage as frequently, they are missing opportunities. So today we're going to talk about risk. We're going to talk about getting uncomfortable. We're going to talk about taking advantage of those. And we're going to be able to hear from two incredible women in Florida who are making that happen and engaging with risk in their serving as elected officials. I am personally a Floridian myself. I'm so excited to be featuring my home state, and I look forward to being able to share this with all of you. So without further ado, I will introduce our speakers, and then we'll be able to hear from them directly. So first, we have Commissioner Reina Saco. Reina Saco was born in Santiago de Cuba in 1990, and she and her family fled Cuba in 1994 and were held in a refugee camp until being paroled into the United States in 1995. Her family settled in Hialeah, Florida, and still live there today. Commissioner Saco graduated from the University of South Florida with a Bachelor's of Arts in Russian Studies and in English Literature. She went on to study at the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor, where she graduated with a master's in Russian, Eastern European, and Eurasian Studies. Her final stop was a relocation to Gainesville, Florida, where she received her Juris Doctorate from the University of Florida's Levin College of Law. After receiving her JD in 2017, she began her legal career as an Equal Justice Works Fellow at Florida Legal Services Incorporated. Through her fellowship, she worked with low-income and immigrant communities to secure safe and affordable housing, as well as access to community resources and rights. We are also joined by State Representative Amber Mariano. State Representative Amber Mariano is a Republican serving District 36 in the Florida House of Representatives, which includes Hudson, Port Richey, Newport Richey, and Holiday, Florida. Elected in 2016 at the age of 21, Representative Mariano is the youngest state representative to serve in Florida's legislature. Representative Mariano graduated from the University of Central Florida with a Bachelor of Arts degree in political science, specializing in American politics and policy in 2017, and is currently pursuing a master's in political science at the University of West Florida. While serving in the Florida legislature, Representative Mariano is fighting to improve infrastructure issues in Pasco County and make the higher education system more affordable and accessible. Mariano serves as Vice Chair on the Higher Education and Career Readiness Subcommittee and the Business and Professions Subcommittee. She is also on the Health Quality Subcommittee, Higher Education Appropriation Subcommittee, Education Committee, and alternating chair on the Joint Committee on Public Counsel Oversight. Representative Mariano is also actively involved with PACE, Center for Girls in Pasco, Smile Faith, the West Pasco Chamber of Commerce, and currently works as a paralegal at the Kemp, Rouge, and Green law firm. So without further ado, I will allow these wonderful ladies to introduce themselves with a little bit more personal depth than their bios. And then we'll start in with some questions prepared from She Should Run, and we'll move into a live Q&A with all of you. So we'll hear from you first, Reina.
Thank you. You covered a good chunk of it, but I think one thing that I should stress is there's always been a risk in my life, even since I was a little girl. My parents took the risk to put me on a boat. My parents took the risk to leave Cuba to come to the US. My parents took the risk to set aside a ton of money, hoping that I could go to college and make something of myself. And then I took a risk and another risk, and I went to law school. And then I took another risk and I ran for office. So it's never been a slow and steady kind of lifestyle for me. But one thing that I've always thought of is, if I have these skills that I should be gifted with and an opportunity that I had just by sheer luck, why shouldn't I share it with other people? And so that was really one of the things that compelled me to run for office. Before I ran for office, I was an attorney. I was doing okay for being in public interest. It's not the most lucrative career, but I had won a fellowship. I was doing work that I enjoyed. I was helping people that I knew, families just like mine, from when I had been a kid. And I was able to work in 2 languages, which was actually a huge joy for myself. But the more I worked in North Central Florida, the more I got, I don't want to say sucked in, but brought into Gainesville and Alachua County politics. I realized that there was a need. There was a serious need for representation and advocacy for someone who knew the immigrant community, who knew the Hispanic community, and who was willing to stand up and speak when it was necessary. And thankfully, law school gave me the ability to speak up without fear of repercussion and without fear of the public staring at you, wondering, why are you still going on about this? But there were limits. Here in Gainesville, we have 3 minutes to speak if you're a member of the audience. I can speak pretty quickly. I can't speak quickly enough in 3 minutes to convey why something needs to change. I had friends on the commission who were sympathetic to a lot of the issues I brought up, but it wasn't their issues, and they can only convey so much. It's like a game of telephone. You can tell somebody what the issue is, but when they repeat it, it's never going to come out quite the same. And I really got tired of asking for permission, asking for help when it's something I realized I could do myself. And so I casually mentioned that one day as a very offhand comment of, you know what, I should just do this myself. I'm tired of asking the boys. And the next thing I knew, a female commissioner asked me to lunch and proposed that I should run. She told me, you know, there's a seat that's going to be open. The incumbent is term limited. You should run. And I had just expected lunch to talk over an issue. I was not emotionally prepared to be asked to run for office. But she sent me home. She said, think about it. And I did. And there were certainly a million things I could do as a commissioner that I couldn't do as a member of the general public. But there was also the matter of salary. There was a matter of my job. My job frequently suggested that I sue the city or the local government or their police department or some other agency. And so I'd have to lose my job if I took on this. It's the matter of, you know, asking people for money to campaign. I worked for free. All of my services were pro bono. I didn't even get paid for my real job. How was I going to go around asking people to give me $250 to run for office? But the more I sat there and the more I thought about it, it seemed like the best calculated risk. It was actually a term that would be 1.5 times longer than a usual term, because we have changed where our elections happen. I would actually get 4.5 years instead of the regular 3. It was an empty seat, so I would be going up against, you know, whoever thought they could go against me. And if I started early enough, there wouldn't really be a lot of competition from the Democratic side. And that was that calculated moment where I said I should do this. And then I took the plunge, so to speak, and started telling folks, and here I am.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing part of your story, Reina, and we'll be able to hear more from you throughout the session. So thank you so much for that introduction. Amber, we'd love to hear from you now.
Great. Well, hello, everyone. My name is Amber Mariano. As she said, I'm a state representative in West Pasco County. I represent Hudson, Port Richey, New Port Richey, and Holiday, the area where I've spent my entire life. And I've always wanted to run for office. My goal is to always be president. Maybe it'll happen, we'll see. But when I went to college, I went to the University of Central Florida, studied political science, and I went and interned in DC for a summer for Senator Rubio. Really enjoyed that. And then I moved back to college and was just working my way up in student government and, you know, finishing my classes. And I had a professor come up to me and say, hey, I think you should go do this internship in Tallahassee. And for those of you not from Florida, that's our state capital here. And I had just done the internship in DC. And so in my mind, you know, I had DC up here, Tallahassee down here. You know, what am I really going to learn from that if I've already gone to DC? But he was very persistent. He said, you really should do this. It's a very prestigious internship program where they cover your room and board while you're there, and you get a stipend. So it's much better than most internships where you get nothing. And so he kept asking me to go do it. And so I applied, and everything I had really applied for before that internship, I had been denied because I would be totally different versions of myself in interviews because I would be so nervous. I would either be very calm, cool, collected, or I would be the most passionate person you've ever seen in your life. But on this interview, I didn't really care about going, so I was myself, and then I got it. So I went to Tallahassee for a session and interned for 2 different members. One was Reina Placencia and one was Scott Plakin. And Reina Placencia, he really took me under his wing and really tried to coach me on, much more than just how do you send these letters back to constituents, but how are we making our decisions on these votes, on these bills that we're considering when there's a lot of pressure in a lot of different directions. And so I really learned a lot up there. And while I was up there, I was told that, they needed to have someone run in District 49. There was no, I'm Republican, there was no Republican running at the time. It was an open seat as well. And I had just heard that in passing, and I was like, you know what, I want to do it. So I filed to run in Orlando. And then as I was knocking on doors, I realized, although I was going to school in Orlando, I really didn't understand the local issues there because I've only been there for a couple years. And so I really started to think, like, what would be the best use of my talent? So I decided to actually go and run back home instead here in West Pasco County, an area where I know the issues, I know the people, I know the community. And so I filed to run here against an incumbent of the other party and worked really hard. This is in 2016. My opponent had raised about $300,000. I had raised about $40,000. I did have some name ID. My dad's been in office as a county commissioner for quite a few years, so I did have that going for me. But really, I just hit the pavement, knocked on doors, and on election day, I remember, leading up to the election, I was told I was 12 points down in the polls, and so I didn't think I had a chance. But of course, you gotta keep working, and I was already thinking of what I was gonna do next if it didn't work out. But early voting comes, and all of a sudden, everyone that's talking to me at the polls is walking out the door saying, I voted for you, I voted for you, I voted for you. And so I was like, can I really be this far behind if every single person I'm meeting is telling me they voted for me? And so actually ended up being where I won on election night, clearly by a margin just over the amount of a recount. It was like 691 votes. And it was the best day of my life. But, since then, there's been a lot of challenges too. I was reelected in 2018 by a much larger margin, from less than a point the first time, this time to I think it was 18 points. So I've been working really hard, but if I hadn't been able to take that risk in the beginning when I was still in school at UCF, I was commuting back and forth to campaign here and go to school. It's about a 2-hour drive. It really takes that risk of just being able to throw your hat in the ring. And some people get asked, some people don't, but especially with women, it takes, a lot more encouragement. So it really was a big risk, but I hope it's paid off. I think it's paid off.
Wonderful. And it's so excellent to be able to hear some of that texture that adds to the story, instead of it just being, for those of us as viewers, to be like, we don't know anything, but now this person is serving. And so thank you both for being able to share some of that. And so Reina, we'll have you come back, and we're going to just move into some prepared Q&A. A lot of this comes from those of you who shared questions in the registration process. So thank you so much for that. Our first question, keeping with this theme of risk, you both mentioned different challenges that you faced as you were making the determination to run. We know that women are making mental calculations as they're considering this possibility for themselves. I'm curious to hear from each of you, what was it like to go from like, maybe this could be something I do, to I can do this, I'm going to do this? And what sort of things were you weighing in your minds as you made those mental calculations yourselves? So again, we'll go Reina first and then Amber.
So I said earlier a little where I had to calculate, I'm giving up my very comfortable career as an attorney, but it's 4.5 years. It's almost, it's 1.5 the usual terms that someone will get. That's a huge plus. I honestly did make a pro-con list of not, I get great parking downtown, but things like this is a much longer term. If I have anybody up against me, it won't be anybody good. And I honestly didn't have many. I had 3 opponents, but only one of them was considered a substantive opponent. And similar to Representative Mariano, I only won by a small margin that first time, even though it was thought, well, what can you do? But I won just enough. I think I had to win by 50.1 or higher, 50% in one person. And I managed to get, I think, an extra couple hundred. But that was one thing that I calculated. Can I do that without a run-on? Can I do it without a run-on? Can I afford a run-on at the end? Because that would be a completely separate election that I have to keep doing for another couple months. Do I have the friends and family who can help support me in this, emotionally and financially? Do I know enough people who are willing to support me in this? And that was a big analysis portion of it. And so one of the things I did is I sat down and I made a list of all the people I knew. Like I downloaded my entire Facebook, I downloaded my phone. It sounded very transactional and I hated doing it, but it was part of the assessment early on. Do I know people with money? Do I know people who would get me to a certain threshold until I can build my name long and big enough to ask random people for money? And that was it. I had my family help me. I had friends help me, and that was enough to start getting materials out, to start getting my name out. But it was that initial assessment of, do I even have the foundation? And I think where I realized I did have the foundation is another commissioner asked me to do it. I was working as the attorney for a couple of local groups that were grassroots activists here in the city. So they knew me, their people knew me. They may not have the money, but they had, I had the name recognition and people knew who I was and what I stood for. And I thought that should be enough. If enough people know me, enough people trust me with their legal issues, I can at least try this. And worst case, I still have a job as an attorney.
No, absolutely. And I think that it's important, right, that we are realistic with ourselves about what it takes. And every race is a little bit different. So recognizing what that looks like for you and being able to pursue it in the right ways. Thank you so much for sharing that. And then Amber, we'll hear from you again, focusing on what it was that you calculated as you were going through that took you from maybe I think I could do this to yes, I can, and I'm going to run for office.
Sure. Well, I do think I am outside of the norm in this aspect, where someone just mentioned the possibility of trying to find someone to run, and then I just the next day said, I'm it. So there wasn't a ton of calculation, but, for me, I knew I could work harder than anyone else that I was running against. I knew there was going to be a challenge in terms of, running. I was 20 when I filed to run. Hadn't graduated college yet. And so that, of course, was going to, could be a challenge depending on how my opponent would frame it. And so really just making sure that I was, going to put in the effort was the only, deciding factor for me. Is I kind of looked at it as and it's in hindsight, I wish I had really thought I was going to win the whole time. I probably would have won by a larger margin, because I was scared. I mean, everyone's scared when they're running anytime. I mean, I'm scared this election. Of course, you have to be. If you're not acting like you're 20 points behind, you're not going to win. And so, just really calculating, am I going to put in the time that it's going to take? Because I mean, I knocked on doors every single day. I probably hit my first campaign cycle when it was just me, my dad, and my sister going door to door. I mean, we probably hit 10,000 doors, maybe more. And then this past cycle in 2018, I had a much larger team. I had 30 kids helping me go door to door, and we hit like 60, 70,000 doors. So with that many more people, still, we hit a pretty good amount that first race, just us. And so really, for me, it was, I'm still in college. If I do this, I can graduate. And so my plan was to go to law school. That's not really happening at this point because you can't take off a whole semester for session, unfortunately. But, really just calculating, like, do I have the time to put in the work it's going to take, or the money? You gotta have one or the other. And if so, just doing everything you possibly can. And at the end of the day, I was like, I looked at it as I want to have a career in politics, whether it's now or whether it's in 20 years when maybe I'm married with kids and establishing my career and want to go that way. That was my plan. But, just really finding the time and making sure that, no one was going to work hard for you your first time. You really have to do, a lot of the labor yourself unless you're, extremely well connected and lucky. But, that was the biggest thing for me, is just making sure you can find the time.
Absolutely. And I love these two sentiments you brought together of there's an open seat and I'm going to run for it. I can do this, to, oh my gosh, I'm a little bit scared. Now I have to knock doors. And what does this fit with my larger plan? And recognizing that our emotions are going to kind of run the gamut as we have these experiences, but taking the confidence and power to say, yes, I'm going to do this, is such an important first step of your story that I think is such a huge learning moment. So I have some other questions for both of you. And again, if those of you in the audience have questions for our panelists, go ahead and put them in the Q&A box. I'll see those and be sure to voice them over on your behalf. Also, for anyone who's just joining, it looks like there's a Zoom plugin that was missing. If you would like captions, there's a link in the chat so that you can see live captions throughout today's session. So our next question is for you, Reina. I know that when we're running for office and even after we've won and we're serving in office, not everyone is always going to agree with us. In fact, sometimes we'll have pretty strong opponents. How do you decide when you're going to engage and either try to collaborate or maybe have a respectful debate versus when do you just let things go and recognize that that's the right choice, and navigating that process as you face opponents throughout when you're running and now that you're serving?
So I think it's great that I came from a legal background because it gave me the adversarial capabilities of I have thick skin. I know when to let things bounce. But one of the things when I was running for office, one of my opponents was heinous, absolutely heinous, said awful, terrible things. At one point called me a lesbian, whore, anti-Semitic monster, like everything. There were emails after emails about how terrible I was, and he would copy in the newspapers and say just everything and anything under the sun. And at some point, I did actually comment back because people were asking. He would, at forums, he would bring it up and everyone would say, well, what is it? And so there were parts of it that I chose to engage. There were parts of it that I said, this is my life. These are some of my beliefs. I'm not going to change my beliefs on certain issues. But I do want to make one statement. If you think calling me a lesbian is an insult, we have a bigger problem here. And that actually, if you think saying I'm sexually active is an insult, we have a bigger problem here. And that actually buoyed a lot of people saying, yeah, what is wrong with you? And that was I think the more calculated response of, we're going to address this, but we're going to address what's wrong with you. And a lot of people actually love that. We made a video. I met people thereafter who saw, they're like, oh no, I saw it. I can't believe that's happening. But good on you for calling out, someone who would use those words as an insult. Good on you for that. We're so proud of that. And it really kind of showed that I won't be steamrolled. And it showed it early on where I won't be humiliated. I won't be insulted by being called a person. Other issues were very insulting and I just wasn't going to dignify them with a response. But, there are times where people just don't agree, where you are the lone person standing out. And I'm experiencing that a lot now. I had a professor in law school that would say, if you put your hand over your belly, does it feel right? You get the feel right feeling. If you don't do it. And there are times where I have to do that. I have to follow my gut and vote the way that I feel. And the way I look at it is I have a client. My constituents are my clients. There are issues that I care about deeply that I just can't shake. They're so part of my core, and people knew that when I came in. If I vote that way, the people who voted me in may not be the ones calling in, may not be the ones writing letters, but they knew me, they voted for me, and they knew what I stood for and were comfortable with it. I'm comfortable voting this way because they voted for me. They voted for a person who believes in these issues. And so that really kind of is what comforts me, saying if 11,000 people voted for me, knowing that this is who I am and what I believe in and how I believe, I can't be entirely wrong or alone. And sometimes it does feel like you're alone. We have a big vote tomorrow on something I worked on for 2 years. It's exciting, but we've gotten a second cousin of hate mail consistently about it. And I'm comfortable voting the way I am, despite all the loud voices, because again, people knew me for this issue. People believed in me because of this issue and supported it for 2 years. I know it's been there. I am comfortable in my vote and the direction I'm going in. And if they don't like it, well, they can try to vote me out. They're going to have to work hard for it, but they can try. And I don't think they can.
I think that that's incredible. And it was one of the reasons after our discussion, I wanted to be sure to give you the opportunity to share that story here, because I think so many of us long to be accepted and supported, and running for office puts us at risk of a lot of rejection or ridicule. And I think that you had such a powerful way of responding to that when it happened to you, and recognizing that this was an opportunity for you to stand up for yourself and stand up for the community that you represent, ensuring that they know that you're someone who stands for personhood, for making sure that they have a place with you as their representative. And I think that that's a really important way to show self-respect, and also to show respect for the people who are voting for you. So thank you so much for sharing that story. I found it really impressive while we were talking. Similarly, this question is for you, Representative Mariano, is that many women that we speak to are really nervous about their qualifications, or I'm too young, or people going to take me seriously. You were 20 years old when you filed to run for office. How did you engage with anyone who maybe had thoughts or concerns about that, or making sure that you owned your own self and recognizing that you were qualified and prepared to take on this challenge?
Yeah, absolutely. One story I'd like to share is from my first debate. My opponent was also a woman, and you're kind of in a tough spot in terms of like trying to come across as mean or patronizing when you're trying to go after someone's inexperience, right? And so no matter the gender, of course, but so luckily, because she thought she was in such a good position, this is my take on the situation, instead of attacking me on it, instead of like making it come out as a negative, I remember, she literally had the audience, it was very patronizing, give me a round of applause for giving this a shot and like giving it a go, in our first debate, and so I'm looking at that and I'm like, I guess it's better than the alternative of her going off and saying why I'm not qualified to do this, so I'll take it. But so it was a tough thing to deal with. But what I realized is when I was going door to door and actually talking to the people that were going to vote for me, or vote, they all loved the fresh, young voice coming to the table, no matter the party, no matter the age. Really, the older people liked it the most. They were so excited. And so really it's hard because what comes out in the media and what they put out in, the editorials or whatever, it really frames it totally differently than how people actually feel. For the most part, people would think it would be cool that you're running for office at that age. But in terms of qualification and actually being able to do this job, what I've realized is you need to, obviously be smart and be able to work hard and solve a problem, but you don't need a long career of public service or in any field, really. As long as you're able to listen, know what's going on in your community, that's a huge thing, is awareness of the issues, and being able to work hard to address them and solve them and really anyone can run for office. Anyone can do that as long as they're willing to put in the time on those community issues. And so when you talk to people and you are aware of the issues and you're telling them about the issues that they care about before they even have to mention them, to them, that's all they need to hear, is that you're aware and you're going to work on it and you're going to try and solve it.
I love that. At She Should Run, we have a little slogan that we often share, and that is, if you care, you're qualified. And I think that you've demonstrated that so well here, that if you're someone who's willing to listen, show that you're caring for the people that you would be serving, that you care about the issues that impact them, you're willing to dedicate the time to learn about those and then to represent on behalf of those, that is what makes us qualified. And that it's not a matter of age or professional experience that allows for representation of the people to be a worthwhile pursuit, regardless of what you've done previous. So thank you so much for sharing that, Amber. So we have a question. This is from Sarah Weed. She shared that she loves seeing people from the legal field. She's a paralegal herself, which is always fun to see connections there. And she asked, do you have any advice for someone navigating risk as a working woman with a family? It feels that the stakes are particularly high for me to step out. So just curious if either of you want to jump in response to that.
Sure. I feel like I'm really dealing with that right now. I'm at a crossroads in my life. My first 3 years I was elected, I only served. I didn't have any other income really. I did some real estate, but nothing, time consuming. And I've recently got engaged and saving for a wedding. And I've now realized that now I'm starting a new chapter of my life where hopefully I'll be starting a family soon, getting married in the next couple months here. So we're a part-time legislature. We certainly get paid as if we're a part-time legislature. And so while it's been okay while I was freshly graduated and, trying to make it through, now that I'm looking at starting a family, I realized I need to step up the income level and, go get a full-time job. Because when people come in and run for office, for the most part, they're pretty established in their career. They talk with their bosses about it, or they're their own boss, and they say, I'm going to be gone for these events at this time, and that just is what it is. But when you're starting an entry-level position, it's much harder to get that flexibility. And so I've recently started working as a paralegal, as you introduced. And so I'm doing that, started my way at the bottom, opening files and, moving my way up just like anyone else. I had to request off time to do this conference here. I mean, it's, I'm really having to learn that balance, and I can only imagine it'll get harder as I have kids as well. And so really you have to be able to, I am trying to compartmentalize, is of course my phone's always available for if someone calls me and they have an issue, but there are a lot of just calls throughout the day that I can't take at this point, not really from constituent issues, but just from, whatever else is going on in the community. And I really just have to focus on, this is a part-time legislature. I'm supposed to have another job, so I need to do my other job, support my family. And then on the weekends I go and knock doors, and at the night I go to events in the community. On my way to and from work, I make fundraising calls. I mean, I have it very compartmentalized, and it is a huge challenge. And, I definitely give credit to the women that are doing it with young kids. I hope to be one of them soon. But, just even managing this, it has been a huge challenge with planning a wedding as well, election serving, and now, full-time job. So it's been a challenge, but you just have to be able to prioritize and have great time management skills. And I've learned to develop them.
I love how you recognize the opportunities for your time to be dedicated on these spaces, using the commute to make these fundraising calls, recognizing where those pockets of opportunity exist. Reina, was there anything that you wanted to add to that?
So I worked full-time, but also had the campaign in the evenings. And I had told my boss, they were very excited. The words were, it'll be good to have someone useful at Gainesville. So they were excited, and most bosses might not be, because they recognize your time might be split, but it was understood that I would be working 9 to 5, but no later than 5:30, I had to be gone. And that was an understanding. When I needed more time, I used up my paid time off and my sick leave and said, I don't plan on getting sick, but I actually did get sick in the middle of it. So I couldn't do my job or campaign. And that was 2 days of agony. But similar to what Amber said, I had to compartmentalize where, 9 to 5 is work. If I take an extra Friday off, it's going to be calls from 10 a.m. to whenever. And all weekend, I'm going to be knocking on doors with interns. At midnight, I'm talking to my campaign manager and finalizing materials, finally sleeping some so I can start the workday all over again. But like you said, if you care, you're qualified, and I cared, I wanted it. And so you can go without sleep for a little while if it's something you really want. But I felt that I was kind of lucky, and that was part of my risk assessment. I don't have kids. I didn't have a partner at the time. I do now. And he wonders a lot about my career choices. And so do I, but it's a good fun. But all I had was a cat. And I was like, I could do this. All I have is a cat. I don't have to balance for anyone. I don't need to think about finances for anyone. I calculated that I could live on the commission salary alone if I couldn't find another job. And that was impressive. What is the actual salary of it? Do I have a partner who will bring in a supplemental salary? And as it is now, I can live off my commission salary alone, but I'm still looking for a potential part-time job teaching or working at either of the community college here or the university, because that is a time-friendly supplemental income that I could look for as an elected official. So that's one thing that I would suggest. If you can't keep your original job, to look for another one similar to that, where they are always looking for elected officials or local, I don't want to say personalities, but local folks of a certain nature to kind of pass on what they have to the schools.
Absolutely. I think that you both really capitalized on this, taking advantage of flexibility and being creative with how you navigate that for yourselves. I will just add, Sarah, with your question, if you're interested, Road to Run Balance, that focused on the state of Utah, Kat Martinez talked about her balancing motherhood, being a present partner, working and running for office, and what that meant for her. So I think it might be worth looking at. So another question that we had, this one comes from Adina. How do you increase your aptitude for risk? And I think this is a really interesting one. I feel like for me, the more I willingly do something daring or out of my comfort zone, the more I develop a resilience for that. But I'm curious to hear how both of you continue to increase your aptitude for taking on risks and doing so in a way that feels true to who you are.
So I kind of said, kind of agreeing with you, where I was raised in a culture of risk taking. Some of it mostly calculated, some of it a little daredevilish, but you have to start saying yes in certain areas. And it doesn't have to be, I'm going to drop everything and go to law school. It can be, I'm going to pick up a new hobby. That's a small new risk. It's low cost. I'm going to run a 5K. I'd never run a 5K before. I said I would. And so you slowly start building up. I think it's less risk and more dedication to a goal, where I'm going to do X. And if I really want to do X, what do I need to do for it? And it comes in different levels of risk, where you start with different little goals that you might like, and you kind of build up that confidence in yourself of, I did this thing before that I'd never dreamed of. I can probably do this other thing I've never dreamed of before. And that's how I've done it, where I've slowly over the years just built up a collection of things that my parents don't know where I got the inkling to do, and then decided to do them and did them, and then went on with my life to the next goal.
Absolutely. I hear it almost as building up a muscle. So our first day in the gym, we might not be able to do all the exercises, or we might get tired quickly. But the more that we practice at it, the better able we are to do that thing. I really love your example of maybe try a new hobby, finding things that push us outside our comfort zone, take on those risks, get used to feeling that discomfort and pushing yourself through it. I think that's excellent advice. I want to make sure we can answer as many questions as possible. So rather than having both of you answer each question, we'll just kind of continue to go. However, this one I do think it might be interesting to hear both of your perspectives on, because everyone leads differently. So this question is, how did you establish your voice as a leader? And how did your identity and culture play a part into that? So if we can hear from you first, Amber, and then we'll finish with you, Reina.
Sure. That's a great question. I don't know the answer to that. I feel like I just try to be as authentic as possible. I'm never afraid to ask a question. And so, you know, especially when you're first coming in and at the age I was at, people already are going to have their preconceived ideas of, you know, how I'm going to lead and what that's going to look like. And so for me, I really just tried to, for the first year, to really just ask as many questions as possible and just try and learn as much as possible. I mean, I'm still learning so much every single day, especially when we're up in Tallahassee and I'm on a different committee than I was the year before, a whole new slew of issues that I'm learning about in depth. And, you know, my voice, I try to be where I am doing everything I possibly can to represent my district. And when they call me and they have questions about issues, my favorite issues to work on are issues that no one really cares about unless it's really affecting you. Very niche issues. I mean, I've worked on some larger things as well, like education as a whole, and workforce education's been a big priority of mine. But my favorite bills to file and to work on are these small, narrow issues where someone literally called me and said, I'm having an issue with this. And because of the way the statute's written, it has to be a legislative fix. And we can only file 6 bills a year. So there's only so many that we can do. But those are my favorite ones to work on, because those are the ones where I feel like I'm not just legislating to legislate. I am legislating to solve a problem that someone brought to me. And so that's what I've tried to make my voice be, as a problem solver. Hopefully that's how I'm viewed. I don't really know. But that's, for me, is just being as authentic as possible and just being willing to listen to anyone's opinions, and not being afraid to share your own, or to share your, I don't say ignorance on an issue, but if you don't know what they're talking about when they come tell you this whole issue, you gotta say, look, you're gonna have to educate me. I'll go educate myself after we talk about it, but I have no background in family law. For example, when people come in with constituent cases with Department of Children and Families, I have no background in that. So you're gonna have to educate me on your issue. I'll do my research and we'll move forward together, but I'm not gonna sit here and try and just spout out to you, you know, what I think should be done. I'm gonna do my research first.
Absolutely. I love this merger of humility and curiosity that you bring to the table. And I've heard this so much of the stories that you shared, right? That if you're willing to knock the doors, ask constituents what they're interested in, ask questions along the way, invite people to be part of that with you. I feel like that's so true to your leadership style and part of your owning your voice. And this is one of the reasons I wanted to have the question for both of you, is because I think everyone's going to lead differently. Authentic in its nature is going to look different on each person. So thank you for sharing that. So Reina, I'll have you answer the same question again. How did you develop your voice as a leader, and how did your culture and experiences impact that?
I think a lot of my volunteering and my first job really helped set that style, where we did community lawyering, which is I don't lead, I give you the tools so that you can take on this issue further yourself. And so one of the things that I did in this community in Gainesville and in Alachua County is, when I was an attorney for a group on a project, I wouldn't advocate directly for them to the city. I would give them the research. I would explain it to them in layman's terms. I would break it down so that they could go on and do that. And I did that as an attorney with issues like family law, where I'd go to nonprofits that want to help, and I would explain the law to them. I would show them how to fill out the forms. I would explain the process so that they then have the tools and they don't rely on me exclusively. And so I think establishing my voice was finding that I'm a support until somebody gets, I guess, tries to be just openly nasty to someone. and talk down to them. And then I'll come in and they can fight with an attorney. And right now with a commissioner, if they want to go that route. But until then, it's giving the tools to my constituents, to my clients, so that they know how to advocate for themselves, so that they have the foundational knowledge and they kind of understand what's going on and can take care of it themselves as much as they can. And once they need me, I'm there, but I want them to have the tools. Equal Justice Works, which was what my fellowship really focused on, what happens when you're gone? What happens when you are no longer there? How do people? And so I think giving those tools and giving that education, and even now letting people know how City Hall works, how an ordinance works, which departments handle what can the city do and not do? I think that's part of passing on that power so that they know and have the ability to do this themselves and maybe follow me. That's my leading style and culture, I guess, where I give you the tools until you absolutely need me.
I love that. And I hear so much of the advocacy behind that, and advocating from your lawyer background, using your position and making sure that people know what they need to be able to pursue that for themselves. So this will be our final question. This is from Hannah Varner. And this question focuses on, okay, I've already decided I'm going to take the risk and I'm going to run. What would you, as two women who've run before, who've won before, maybe through your experience or just general know-how, what would you recommend as the first step to take in that direction? And we'll do this as a quick round robin before we close out. So Reina, I think you're already off mute if you want to go first.
I think setting a list of what endorsements I'm willing to compromise for. And so I got endorsements that I had to, move heaven and earth to prove to someone that I'm good enough. And that took a lot of time and energy. And I think that time and energy, I could have talked to another 100 people, another 100 doors I could have knocked on instead of trying to get that one endorsement. And I think looking back on, just kind of prioritizing which of these is going to be more important, which endorsements, do I need to get them all? Do I need to have everyone like me? Or can I do more good going out? And I think that's one thing I would go back and reassess for myself. Which of those matters more, 100 people or one endorsement? And so that's mine.
No, I love that. I think those are important things for people to consider. Thank you for sharing that as a piece of advice. And Amber, anything that you would add?
Yeah, I think, is the most important thing is finding a mentor and finding someone who has done what you've done or what you're trying to do successfully, and ask for their advice. Even if maybe they're a different party or they're in a different area and they don't know the local, position, just trying to get someone's advice who's been there and can kind of walk you through step by step as you come to a problem and help you figure out how to navigate it. And I think a really important thing before you decide to run too is making sure you have, a team behind you. And it doesn't have to be anyone paid by any means, but just whether it's your family or friends. I mean, my first race, I had some friends come out on the weekends with me and just knock. I couldn't pay them, obviously. I had no money. But, I got 20 people to come out on a Saturday that I just said, hey, I really need your support here. And just knowing that you have the capability to gather that. And if not, start working on how you can get there, whether it's going to your local Republican club or a Democrat club or the college Republicans or whatever it may be, just really making sure you can get those people together, because the more the merrier.
Absolutely. I love that you invite community wherever you go to be a part of that, and specifically in seeking out a mentor. So for those of you who attended today, thank you so much for being here. As I mentioned at the top, we have a short 3-minute evaluation survey. We would love to hear your feedback on today. Reina, Amber, thank you so much for being with us, for sharing your expertise, for your service to your communities as a fellow Floridian. I am so excited to know that there are women who are serving in incredible areas and making good things happen. I am so impressed by both of you, and thank you for taking the time to answer our community questions and to share a bit of your stories with us. For those who have signed up, later this evening, we are going to be having a happy hour as a part of our Road to Run event. This will give us a chance to flip the tables. So at this event, we were able to hear from two incredible women. Later this evening, we're going to invite all of you to be able to speak with one another, develop relationships, and hear from some of the She Should Run team, myself among us. Until then, we will have our last Road to Run event focusing on Nashville, and we will be sharing information about that coming up. In the meantime, if you're looking for a mentor, have questions about running for office, or want to be part of a community of women who think that this is an important opportunity for them, we invite you to join the She Should Run community and check out the resources available there. All of these links for the evaluation and for the community are available in the chat. Otherwise, we look forward to seeing those of you who will be joining us tonight and seeing you online in the community. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and we'll see you soon.